You work the line long enough, you realize the desert isn't just a place. It is a living, breathing thing, and it doesn't like us. It doesn't like the agents, it doesn't like the migrants, and it certainly doesn't like the noise we bring into its house. I've been with Border Patrol for 12 years, mostly stationed out of the Tucson sector. I've seen things that would make a tough man crumble heat stroke victims who looked like wax figures melting in the sun, cartel shootouts that sounded like thunder rolling across the plains. But nothing, absolutely nothing, sticks with me like the night I took a solo patrol into Box Canyon. We call it Sector 4 formally, but the locals and the seasoned agents just call it the Echo Chamber. It's a geological freak of nature. The canyon walls are sheer granite, rising up 300 feet on either side, and the acoustics are wrong. If you drop a pebble on the west side, you hear it land on the east side. The wind howls through there and sounds like a choir of screaming women. Because of the way sound bounces, radio signals are garbage. You go in there, you're cut off. Dead air. For that reason, we usually patrol it in pairs during the day. Never alone. Never at night. But that Tuesday was different. We were severely understaffed. A flu bug had wiped out half the station, and we had intel that a large group was moving high-value narcotics through the corridor. My supervisor, a guy named Miller, who was usually a stickler for the rules, looked at me with tired eyes and told me to take a vehicle to the ridge and just sit on the sensors. Don't engage, he said. Just watch the scopes. If the ground sensors trip, call it in and we'll send the chopper. It sounded easy enough. I took my Tahoe, loaded up with extra water and my M4, and drove out to the ridge overlooking the canyon. The sun went down around 8 p.m., painting the sky in violent shades of purple and bruised orange before the blackness took over. And out there, the dark is heavy. It presses against the windows of your truck. It feels physical. Around 0200 hours, the silence broke. The seismic sensors, little devices we bury in the dirt that detect vibration, started pinging my laptop. Trip 1, Trip 2, Trip 3. This wasn't a coyote or a deer. The pattern was rhythmic. Footsteps, heavy ones, and a lot of them. According to the data, I had a group of at least 15 individuals moving right through the center of the wash. I keyed my radio to call it in. Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I have seismic activity in Sector 4, requesting air support. Static. Just a wall of white noise. I tried again. Nothing. I was in a dead zone, just on the edge of the ridge. I knew I should have stayed put, but adrenaline is a funny thing. It makes you confident when you should be cautious. I figured if I could just get visual confirmation, I could drive to higher ground and call it in. I grabbed my night vision monocular, checked my rifle, and stepped out of the truck. The air was cold, that sharp desert chill that bites through your uniform. I hiked down the scree slope, my boots crunching loudly on the loose rock. I stopped every few yards to listen. The canyon was dead silent. No crickets. No wind. Just a vacuum. I reached the bottom of the wash, right where the sensors had triggered. I flipped on my night vision. The world turned into a grainy green phosphor landscape. I scanned the area. There were footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. A lot of them. They were erratic, scuffing the ground deeply, suggesting people running or stumbling. But there was no heat. I pulled out my thermal imager. Usually, footprints hold residual heat for a few minutes. These were cold. That's when I heard it. Agent, hey, over here. I spun around, rifle raised. The voice came from a cluster of mesquite bushes about 40 yards away. It was a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. It sounded exactly, and I mean exactly like my partner, Ruiz. Ruiz was at home. He was on leave for the birth of his daughter, I had spoken to him that afternoon. He was 300 miles away. Ruiz? I called out, my voice wavering. That you? Yeah, it's me. Come here. I found them. The cadence was perfect. The slight drawl, the pitch. It was him. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe he got called in for an emergency? Maybe he was messing with me? I lowered my rifle slightly and took a step toward the bush. Ruiz, stop playing. Identify. I found them, the voice repeated. They are hurt. Come help. I took another step. Then I stopped. Something was wrong. The voice. It didn't have a location. It sounded like it was coming from the bushes, but then it sounded like it was coming from the cliff wall behind me. Then it sounded like it was right next to my ear. The acoustics of the canyon. Show yourself. I shouted. A rustling sound came from the brush. A figure stumbled out. It wasn't Ruiz. It was a young man, maybe 19. He was a migrant, judging by his clothes, torn jeans, a faded soccer jersey. He was shoeless. His feet were shredded, leaving bloody prints on the rocks. But it was his face that stopped me cold. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, into the dark. His mouth was open in a silent scream, and blood was trickling from both ears. He collapsed to his knees. I rushed over, keeping my weapon trained on the darkness. I grabbed him by the shoulder. Hey, are you okay? Who else is with you? He looked at me, his eyes wide, pupils dilated so much his eyes looked entirely black. He grabbed my vest. His grip was hysterical, desperate. Did you hear him? He whispered. He spoke English, but barely. Hear who? My partner? The kid shook his head violently. No, not your partner. The mimic. I froze. What are you talking about? It takes voices, he sobbed. We were 12. We heard the border patrol. We heard you guys yelling, stop, and water. We ran toward the voices. We thought we were being rescued, but it wasn't you. He pointed a trembling finger toward the deeper part of the canyon, where the shadows were thickest. It was the rocks, he whispered. The rocks were talking. I stood up, pulling the kid with me. We need to go, now. I keyed my radio again, just out of habit. Dispatch, emergency traffic. Suddenly, from the darkness about 50 yards away, my own voice echoed back at me. Dispatch, emergency traffic. It wasn't an echo. An echo fades. This was a playback. High fidelity. Louder than I had spoken it. I raised my rifle. Who is out there? This is a federal agent. The darkness replied. Who is out there? Federal agent. Help me, Ruiz. Come here. It was cycling through sounds. It played my voice. Then Ruiz's voice. Then the sound of a woman crying. Then, most terrifying of all, it made the sound of a radiostatic burst, perfectly mimicking the mechanical hiss of our equipment. The kid screamed. It's calling the others. It wants more. I didn't wait. I grabbed the kid by the back of his shirt and shoved him toward the trail. Run! Move! We scrambled up the loose rock. I kept my weapon pointed behind us, backing up the slope. The sounds followed us, and they were getting closer. But there were no footsteps, just the noise. It sounded like a crowd of people was right on our heels, laughing, crying, shouting orders, racking shotgun slides. It was a cacophony of chaos, a sonic weapon designed to disorient. We reached the ridge. I threw the kid into the passenger seat of the Tahoe and jumped in the driver's side. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so bad I dropped them. Something hit the side of the truck. It didn't sound like a hand. It sounded wet, heavy, like a slab of raw beef thrown against the metal. I jammed the keys in the ignition and roared the engine to life. I flipped on the high beams. Standing in front of the truck, illuminated in the blinding white light, was nothing. The air was empty, but the dust was swirling as if something massive was standing there. I slammed the truck into reverse, spun around, and floored it. As we sped away, the radio, the one that had been dead silence, suddenly screamed. It wasn't a voice. It was a high-pitched frequency, like a modem connecting, but organic. It pierced my eardrums. I ripped the radio handset out of the dashboard, tearing the wires. We drove in silence for 20 miles. The kid didn't speak. He just rocked back and forth, holding his bleeding ears. When we got back to the station, I processed him. He was medically evaluated. Ruptured eardrums. Severe psychological trauma. He told the interviewers that his group had been led into a box canyon by the sound of a crying baby. When they got there, the walls closed in. He said the ground opened up and swallowed them. He was the only one who ran. I filed my report. I left out the part about the mimic. I wrote it up as suspected cartel activity with high-tech acoustic equipment. It sounded plausible enough for the brass. They sent a tactical team out the next day to sweep the area. They found nothing. No footprints except mine and the kids. No bodies. No equipment. Just empty desert. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. A week later, I was washing my truck. I went to the passenger side, where I had heard that wet thump. There was a mark. It wasn't a dent. It was a residue. An oily black smear in the shape of a handprint. But the fingers, there were too many of them. 7 long, spindly finger marks, dragging down the door panel. I had the truck repainted. I transferred out of the Tucson sector a month later. I work a desk job in San Diego now. Safe, boring, but sometimes, when the office is quiet, or when I'm driving home and the radio is off, I'll hear it. Just a whisper from the back seat. Dispatch. Emergency traffic. I know it's just my memory. I know it's PTSD. At least, that's what I tell myself. But I never turn the radio on anymore. I'm too afraid of who might answer. You can't judge a book by its cover, and you certainly can't judge a rancher by his smile. That's the hard lesson I learned down in the Rio Grande Valley. In this line of work, you develop a sixth sense for bad guys. You look for the nervousness, the sweat, the shifty eyes. But pure evil? Real, genuine darkness? That doesn't look like a monster. It looks like a grandfather. It looks like apple pie and sweet tea. I was a rookie then, stationed near a town called McAllen. Our area of responsibility included a massive property known as the Miller Ranch. 3,000 acres of dense mesquite brush, winding dirt roads, and sorghum fields that ran right up to the river. The owner, Silas Miller, was an institution. He was 82 years old, walked with a cane, and always wore a pristine white cowboy hat. We loved Silas. Every agent in the station knew him. He gave us the gate codes to his property so we could patrol freely. He let us set up motion sensors on his fence lines. He'd even come out to the sector meetings and bring us donuts. He was the ideal citizen, patriotic, helpful, and kind. He was also our best informant. He'd call the station directly on his landline. Boys, he'd say in that gravelly Texas drawl, I got a group of 4 moving through the north pasture. They looked tired. Better come pick 'em up. We'd roll out, and sure enough, we'd find them exactly where he said. It was clockwork. We caught hundreds of people thanks to Silas Miller. We thought he was a hero. We thought he was protecting his land and helping us do our job. God, we were stupid. It happened in November. The sky turned that bruised green color that means a tornado is brewing. The rain started coming down in sheets sideways rain that blinds you. I was on patrol, driving the perimeter of Miller's ranch, when the dirt road turned into soup. My Tahoe, heavy with armor and gear, slid sideways and bogged down into a ditch. I spun the tires, but I was just digging a grave. I was stuck. I grabbed the radio, but the storm was wreaking havoc on the towers. I couldn't get a signal out. I was 5 miles from the main road, soaking wet, and the temperature was dropping fast. Through the rain, I saw the yellow glow of porch lights up on the hill. Miller's barn. I figured I'd hike up, use his landline to call for a tow, maybe wait out the worst of the storm. I grabbed my go bag and started trudging through the mud. By the time I reached the main compound, I was shivering uncontrollably. The main house was dark, but the massive metal barn had a light on inside. I didn't want to wake Silas up. He was an old man, after all, so I slipped into the barn through the side door, just looking for shelter. The barn was cavernous. It smelled of diesel, wet hay, and something else. A sweet, cloying smell, like copper and spoiled meat. I figured a coyote had gotten into the chickens or something. I shook off my rain gear and looked around. Miller was a hobby farmer. He grew sorghum and corn, and he had this quirky habit of making scarecrows. We'd see them from the highway, dozens of them, scattered across his fields. They were crude things, dressed in old flannels and jeans, with burlap sacks for heads. Inside the barn, hanging from the rafters on meat hooks, were 5 of them. I guess he brought them in to keep them from getting ruined by the storm. They were swaying gently in the draft from the storm outside. I walked over to a workbench to set down my gear. I was standing right next to one of the hanging figures. It was wearing a faded plaid shirt and muddy work boots. I remember thinking, that's really detailed. The boots looked worn, the laces frayed. Curiosity is a curse. I reached out and touched the leg of the scarecrow, just feeling the fabric. It wasn't soft. It didn't feel like straw or stuffed newspaper. It felt hard, rigid. I frowned. I shined my flashlight up the leg. The jeans were torn at the knee. Underneath the denim, I didn't see wood or straw. I saw skin. Gray, desiccated, leathery skin. I froze. My brain refused to process it. I thought, maybe it's a mannequin? A realistic prop? I moved the light up to the hands. They were tied together with baling wire. They weren't gloves. They were human hands. The fingers were shriveled, the nails long and yellow. This wasn't a prop. This was a mummified corpse. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the concrete. The beam of my flashlight swung wildly, hitting the other 4 figures hanging in the row. I looked closer. The second one was smaller. A child, maybe 12 years old. The third one was fresh. The blood on the shirt was still wet. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the gut. The smell. The sweet, rotting smell. It was death. This wasn't a barn. It was a slaughterhouse. And the calls? The helpful tips Silas gave us? He wasn't helping us catch people. He was using us to flush them out. He'd call us to one side of the ranch so he could hunt on the other side undisturbed. Or maybe he'd call us to pick up the ones he didn't want, the ones that weren't sporting enough. I heard a sound behind me. The creak of the barn door sliding open. The storm outside was roaring, but the sound of a pump-action shotgun racking a shell is unmistakable. "You boys," a voice rasped, "always sticking your noses where they don't belong." I spun around, drawing my sidearm. Silas Miller stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his white hat. He was wearing a yellow rain slicker, slick with water, and something red. He held a 12-gauge shotgun leveled at my chest. His face, usually so warm and crinkly with laughter, was a mask of cold indifference. "Put the gun down, Silas." I screamed. My voice cracked. I was shaking, and it wasn't from the cold anymore. He chuckled. "I let you on my land. I gave you donuts. And this is how you repay me? Trespassing? These are people, Silas. My God, they're people. They're trespassers," he spat. "Just fertilizer for the sorghum. Nobody misses them. Nobody looks for them. I'm doing a public service." He didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. I dove to the right just as the blast tore through the workbench where I had been standing. Wood splinters exploded into my face. I scrambled behind a tractor tire, my ears ringing. "Don't make this hard, son," he called out, his footsteps crunching on the concrete. "I've got an empty hook right here waiting for you. You'll make a fine watcher for the south field." He was hunting me. In his own barn. I peeked around the tire. He was walking methodically, checking the corners. He had done this before, many times. I took a breath, steadied my hand on the rubber of the tire, and stood up. "Federal agent, drop it." He swung the shotgun toward me. I fired. 3 rounds. 2 to the chest, 1 to the shoulder. Silas Miller dropped like a sack of feed. He didn't scream. He just hit the floor and wheezed. I kept my gun trained on him for 5 minutes, until I was sure he wasn't moving. Then I ran to the landline on the wall, the same phone he used to call us, and dialed 911. The investigation took months. They found 27 bodies on the property. Some were buried. Some were in the barn. And the scarecrows in the fields? The ones we drove past every day? We sent forensics teams out to retrieve them. 8 of them were bodies, encased in preservatives, wrapped in clothes, and hung up on crosses to rot in the sun. I had waved at them. I had driven by, sipping my coffee, waving at dead men, thinking they were farm decorations. I quit the patrol. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't look at a field without wondering what was in it. I couldn't look at a kindly old man without wondering what he did in the dark. Silas died in the ambulance. He never faced trial. The town still talks about him, but in hushed tones. The ranch was sold, plowed over. But I heard the new owners complain about the soil. They say nothing grows right in certain spots. They say the corn comes up tasting like copper. When people think of the Border Patrol, they think of the southern border. They think of dust, rattlesnakes, and blistering heat. But I worked the northern lying Washington state, bordering Canada. The threats there are different. The terrain is dense, ancient forest where trees grow so thick they blot out the sun. And the cold? The cold is a weapon. Up north, we rely heavily on technology. Specifically, FLIR forward-looking infrared, thermal cameras. In the winter, or even the cool summer nights, a human body stands out against the cold background like a flare. You can't hide your heat. Physics doesn't allow it. If you are alive, you glow white on my screen. If you are dead, you fade to gray. It's binary. It's simple. Until the night I got the cold hit. I was operating a mobile surveillance unit, basically a truck with a 30-foot mast and a high-powered thermal camera mounted on top. I was parked on a logging road deep in the North Cascades. We had intel on a smuggling route used for high-end contraband. My job was to scan the valley floor, about 2 miles out. It was 3 a.m. On the thermal screen, the world is grayscale. Trees are dark gray, rocks are black, deer are bright white dots. I was bored, drinking lukewarm coffee, just sweeping the camera back and forth. Then I saw it. A massive heat signature appeared on the edge of the clearing. It was huge, much bigger than a bear. It was bipedal, standing on 2 legs. On the screen, it was glowing a brilliant, washing out white. That meant it was hot. Incredibly hot. A human body registers around 98 degrees. This thing had to be running at 150 degrees to shine that bright. Dispatch, this is Unit 1 Bravo. I have a large anomaly in Sector 9. Possible bear, but it's walking upright. I zoomed in. The resolution on these cameras is incredible. I could see the outline clearly. It was tall, lanky, with arms that hung down past its knees. It wasn't a bear. It looked humanoid, but stretched. As I watched, the figure stopped. It turned its head and looked directly at the camera. That's impossible. I was 2 miles away, hidden in the dark. But it knew. Then, the laws of physics broke. The bright white figure instantly turned black. In thermal imaging, black means cold. Absolute cold. It didn't fade. It didn't cool down. It snapped from 150 degrees to sub-zero in a microsecond. It became a void on the screen, a black hole in the shape of a monster. What the... I muttered, tapping the screen. I thought the sensor had malfunctioned. Then the black shape started moving. It was sprinting toward a small cabin located near the creek bed. I knew that cabin. It was an old hunting shack, supposed to be abandoned. I radioed my partner, Davis, who was on an ATV patrol about 3 miles out. Davis, intercept. I have a subject moving toward the hunting shack. Proceed with extreme caution. My equipment is glitching. I'm getting weird readings. I drove the truck toward the location to back him up. By the time I got to the trailhead, Davis was already there. We dismounted and hiked the half-mile to the cabin. The air was getting colder with every step. It was July, usually about 50 degrees at night, but my breath was misting. Frost was crunching under our boots. By the time we reached the clearing, the trees were coated in ice. "You feel that?" Davis whispered, his teeth chattering. "Yeah, weapons free." We approached the cabin. The windows were frosted over from the inside. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with the barrel of my rifle. The cold inside hit us like a physical wall. It had to be 40 below zero in there. My flashlight beam cut through the freezing fog. There was a table set in the middle of the room. Sitting around it were 3 people: a man, a woman, and a young girl. They were dressed in winter coats, hats, gloves. "Border Patrol." I yelled, "Let me see your hands." They didn't move. I stepped closer. They weren't ignoring me. They were frozen, literally. The man had a fork halfway to his mouth. There was a layer of ice over his open eyes. His skin was blue, crystalline. The woman was reaching for the bread. The little girl was holding a cup. They were frozen in mid-action, like a snapshot. This wasn't hypothermia, where you curl up and go to sleep. This was flash freezing. Something had sucked the heat out of them so fast, their brains didn't even have time to tell their bodies to fall over. Davis was checking the back room. "Sarge," he called out, his voice trembling. "You need to see this." I walked back. On a small cot, there was a journal. The last entry was scrawled in shaky handwriting. "It eats the warmth. We tried to hide the fire, but it smells the heat in our blood. It's outside. The cold one. Don't let it touch you. If you feel the chill, it's already feeding." Suddenly, my radio squealed. It was the proximity alarm on my chest rig. I looked at Davis. He was staring at me with a look of pure horror. "Your nose," he whispered. I touched my nose. I couldn't feel it. I looked at my hand. My fingers were turning a pale, waxy blue. I pulled out my thermal monocular and pointed it at myself. I was turning gray. My heat was vanishing. I felt fine, maybe a little chilly, but the camera showed my body temperature plummeting. My arms were already black on the screen. "Run," I said. "What? Run?" I screamed. We bolted out of the cabin. As we crossed the threshold, I felt something brush against the back of my neck. It felt like walking into a meat locker. A touch so cold it burned. We sprinted through the woods, slipping on the ice, crashing through the brush. We didn't stop until we reached the truck. I cranked the heater to max. I sat there, hyperventilating, watching my skin slowly turn pink again. We called in a hazmat team. We told them it was a chemical leak, something that caused rapid freezing. When they got to the cabin, the bodies were gone. The table was empty. The journal was gone. The only thing left was a layer of water on the floor where the ice had melted. But here is the twist that made me hand in my badge. A week later, I reviewed the footage from the masked camera, the recording of the initial sighting. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I watched the replay. I saw the white figure turn black. I saw it run to the cabin. I saw me and Davis arrive. But then, I saw something I missed in real time. When the figure turned black, it didn't just disappear into the cold background. It dispersed. It turned into a mist. And when we kicked down the door, the mist didn't leave. On the thermal replay, I watched as the black mist flowed out of the cabin door the moment we opened it. It swirled around us, and then it seeped into our clothes. It didn't attack us. It hitched a ride. I live in Arizona now, the hottest place I could find, but it doesn't matter. I'll be sitting on my patio. It's 110 degrees out, and suddenly I'll stop sweating. I'll feel that familiar, impossible chill start in my fingertips. My coffee will freeze in the cup. It's not gone. It's just dormant. It's waiting for me to get cold enough to finish the meal. And every winter, the wait gets a little harder. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.